What's going on, everybody? Clayton Sayfie here with Chris Balas and Austin Fox. We are from the Wolverine.com. Check out our content over there. Use the promo code Blue60 for 2 months for free. Um, Subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Hit the like button. But guys, it should be Michigan-Ohio State week, Michigan-Ohio State game day, and in the weirdest year, possibly of all time, of course, par for the course, no Michigan-Ohio State. We didn't have an NCAA tournament. I mean, the hits keep coming, but this would have been a bloodbath anyway. But at the same time, I would have loved to seen it played. It's one of the best, traditions in college football. But just your thoughts overall, sitting here on Saturday without this game that happens every year since 1917.
How big an underdog was Stanford under Jim Harbaugh when they beat USC?
I want to say 24. Austin probably knows for sure.
I was actually thinking 40.
Yeah,
40?
exactly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, hey, right? There's no guarantee that Michigan wouldn't have gone in there and spanked them, the way that Stanford said USC.
We'll never know. We'll never know what the outcome would have been.
And that's the sad part about this, guys, is that, hey, I would have predicted a Michigan win. I don't know about you guys, but I really thought they had it in them the way they're coming together and playing their best football at this point in the year. Okay, now let's be honest here, guys. It would have been a bloodbath, and I honestly, no, they weren't ducking the game, but it's the best outcome given that. Okay, these kids are decimated. They had all kinds of cases. They had contact tracing, up and down the staff and the players, and where it was just not safe to play. And that's just the way it is. It's sad. There was not one team this year that missed one game and didn't miss a second, with the exception of who? The Buckeyes, and they had to go in there without like 17 or 20 guys against Michigan State, still kick the crap out of them. But you just can't put those kids in that position. So now it does sound like things are getting better. It does sound like there could well be a game next week. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But you know what? It is what it is, guys. And it's so 2020, right? It just seems like a fitting end, not being able to play the game for the first time in 100+ years.
Yeah, Clayton, I'd love to agree with you on this one, man. And in most years I would, because I look so forward to this game every single year. But Chris is absolutely right. This year is different. It wasn't going to be pretty. So honestly, it doesn't break my heart that this game was canceled. Ryan Day had talked this past offseason. He made that comment about potentially hanging 100 on Michigan. And I think they would have ran up the score if they would have had the chance to, and it was not going to be pretty. I believe the line ended at 31 in Ohio State's favor, if I'm correct. So I think a lot of people were taking the over on that one and expecting Ohio State to cover. So I agree with Chris. This is the absolute best outcome, and it's for the best that this game did not get played today.
It might be for the best. My mentality is just always, though, something's not going your way. I think 2020's tricked us into like wanting things to be canceled, and like it's never been an option before. Even if they would have lost, I'm looking at it from just a perspective. I mean, seeing those sets of colors clashing is beautiful, even if the final score wouldn't have been.
Well, yeah, with a lot of blood in there and more red, and no, man, it was a good thing. It is what it is, but the game as much as anyone. Let's be honest, the luster's been off of it for the last however many years because Michigan hasn't been competitive. And, you win 1 out of 16 or whatever, and you go back to John Cooper. I thought, Austin, you did a nice job with an article this week about, rivalries are not always back and forth every year. The Bo and Woody years was actually kind of an exception. I think it was 5-4-1, Schembechler over Hayes. But normally, it's runs. It's like 10 years of, one team maybe dominating and then 8 years of another team dominating, so on and so forth. The problem is Michigan seems so far away from getting back to being competitive where it's their turn again, because Ohio State has become obviously a juggernaut and a football factory, and Michigan has obviously not. So they brought Jim Harbaugh in here. We expected it to be the case where, okay, it's going to be competitive back and forth. It hasn't gotten there. Who knows if it will be, and who knows if Jim Harbaugh will be the guy that gets the opportunity here to right the ship.
Is there a rivalry right now in college football that is back and forth? I mean, when you look at all the rivalries, Alabama dominated LSU until, last year. Florida State's down. If you looked at, Florida State and Clemson were battling for a couple of years. They're not traditional rivals, but there's really no back and forth of two really good programs anymore.
Arizona State, right?
70-7 last night.
70-7. Wow. Talk about laying over, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that game was over before it began. I think you're spot on, Clayton, though. You look at the biggest rivalries in college football right now, and the majority of them are one-sided, whether that's Alabama, Auburn, or even Oklahoma dominating Texas in recent years, Notre Dame, USC. So it runs in streaks like crazy. When you go back and look throughout the history of them, like Chris was saying, Michigan dominated Ohio State prior to the run Ohio State's on now. So it's hard to get out of that rut, but man, all it takes is a victory or two, and oftentimes that's all you need to swing the tide in a big rivalry like this one.
Mm-hmm. Before we get to the Harbaugh stuff, can we just address so Michigan comes out with their positive test number yesterday. It was 13 in the last week, and then you get the Ohio State fans on Twitter last night. And even some Michigan fans saying, "Oh, this is a bad look" or whatever. It's 28 between the last 2 weeks, and you got to be out 21 days plus contact tracing. And Chris, you had reported that they were going to have maybe about 40 scholarship players with staff members and everybody out.
Yeah.
It not only is it like irresponsible and to start doing this and people are like, oh, the Big Ten didn't shut it down. The Big Ten hasn't shut down one game all year. That threshold seemed at the beginning of the year really tough, but it hasn't been a factor at all, including Ohio State when they canceled against Illinois.
Well, they were ducking Illinois, clearly, right? They didn't want any part of Brandon Peters. So, first things first, you can't pay any attention to the Ohio State fan base on Twitter or anywhere else. These people are flat out batshit crazy. The end. I mean, that it is literally the worst fan base in sports. I used to think this was a rivalry based on mutual respect until I went down there, and I think it was 2000. And even before then, these people are crazy. And I was talking to a buddy, TC Horvath, on our board, who actually went down there in 2000. He got hit. He was actually walking up to the game in 2000 with a couple of former Ohio State offensive linemen who had played in the 70s, and they were having a great conversation. And Tim gets hit in the back of the head with a Yoo-Hoo bottle. Talk about your stereotypical, Buckeye experience. And one of the offensive linemen for Ohio State, he goes over and he picks the guy up and throws him against the wall and pins him with his thing. He goes, "That's why we get such a bad rap from the country, because of idiots like you." And he didn't use the word idiots. It was nonstop. I mean, they're nuts. I remember having a buddy that went down there with Go Blue on the back, painted on the back of his van. They put a 2x4 through his window and keyed up the hell out of his van, the Desmond Howard on the side of it. They're crazy. So I wouldn't listen to anything they say or give a crap about their reaction, number one. Number two, just like you said, and what we had reported, they would have had 38 scholarship players available for that game based on the tracing and the numbers. It's not all about, okay, this guy has it, that guy, in this week. Now, granted, they're probably going to get some of those guys back that they would have had a couple of weeks ago, and that's why next week is a possibility. But it would have been irresponsible, and of course, Ohio State fans would be like, "Well, just throw in a couple of walk-ons and recruit the high schools to put out there so we can beat them 100-0 like Ryan Day wanted to." So piss on them, guys. Don't even pay any attention to that.
I think that's yeah, I think that's spot on. You summed up their fan base beautifully. I've heard countless stories about people who've gone down there for games, and like you said, they get their car keyed or their tires cut. Even I've heard stories about that. Women and kids getting called every name in the book in the stands, right by security guards, and they couldn't care less. So it is a psycho fan base, and yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't care less about what anybody in the media, Ohio State people that is, says about Michigan. People like Joey Galloway and Kirk Herbstreit especially. So it's obviously good to have disdain and hatred to a degree in rivalries like this, but then you have some that take it way too far, and Ohio State's fan base sums that sentiment up perfectly.
Yeah, and not only did they have a ton of guys out, but the tests kept coming in positive, Ward Manuel said earlier in the week. So they'd come in every morning, and then more would be positive, so you got to shut it down. And the medical experts, wouldn't clear them to practice. You can't play a game if
they're all part of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
These doctors that are, world renowned, they're all part of this big, vast conspiracy to not have Michigan lose to Ohio State. What a bunch of bullshit, let's be honest.
Yeah, and if it was true, if you think it wouldn't have gotten out, if somebody,
Right.
It wouldn't gotten out that they actually, Jim Harbaugh was saying, like, we're not going to play no matter what. They wanted to play. So, that is what it is. I thought we should discuss it. And, one of the biggest storylines of the week. The next biggest, or probably the biggest, is the Jim Harbaugh situation, where seems like in our little world, at least, it's kind of all eyes are on that, and things, hourly, seem to develop, but we're still at a standstill at the same time. So, Chris, I guess an update on what's going on, because, last week we were talking about what he's been saying to recruits and people around him, that we're going to sign the 3-year deal. We're still recruiting. I'm going to be here, and things like that. A week later, that contract's still on the table, and signing day is coming closer and closer. And I will say this, I think it's more of a story because of the cancellations, because we can't focus on anything else right now. And, but it is what it is. This is where we're at, and signing day's coming. And this is a weird year where signing day's in the middle of the season, technically.
And it's always going to be that way right now in December. So it's funny you say that. It is a huge story. I was at Mr. Spots, shameless plug, and no, I don't get paid for that. I just love my guys at Mr. Spots, and listening to a couple guys behind me talking about, hey, what the hell's going on with the Jim Harbaugh thing, and don't they understand that they're ruining recruiting and that this is a cluster and everything else? And I'm kind of nodding. I'm thinking, yeah, that's what everybody thinks. How can this not be settled? You can talk all you want to about waiting until the end of the year, but recruits are noticing, kids are noticing, and everything we've heard right now, the word that we heard was circus in Schembechler Hall, because Jim Harbaugh saying all the right things. I'm going to be back. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to be here for 3 years, so on and so forth. He's telling recruits that even if he hasn't signed his contract by the time the season starts, that he would be willing to go into that last year with no contract. You can't do that, man. You can't be a lame duck, and you can't, as an athletic director in an athletic department, put yourself in that position. Granted, they're in a tough spot, guys, because the money isn't there like it usually is. They're running a huge deficit, $80 million or something like that, because they didn't have any ticket revenue or any other kind of revenue from games at Michigan Stadium, and COVID has thrown everybody for a loop. But there's got to be some kind of a resolution here, because too many questions being asked, and kids want to know. So you've got signing day, 5 days from now? It's insane. So we think, seriously, we still think it's up in the air. There have been some reports that, hey, they've made up their mind that Jim Harbaugh is not going to be back here next year. Harbaugh and his camp are saying all the right things, and that, hey, an extension could be signed as early as Monday, understanding that signing day is Wednesday. So we'll have to see what happens. But we've maintained all along that the longer it goes, guys, the less likely it is that he'll be here next year. And the fact that it's dragged on this long is really kind of a travesty. I mean, and part of it is because nobody figured that Michigan was going to be this bad this year, right? That's the thing. And now it's come to a head, and these guys were pushing to play. And then you get out there and you lay an egg, and you look like you don't want to be there, and you look like you've got all kinds of dissensions. So that's where we are. Really a tough spot for Ward Manuel. I don't know what he could be doing differently, but it's not my job to know. That's why he gets paid the big bucks.
Yeah, I'll say this before, Austin, I got a question for you, but he said about a month and a half ago, when he was pressed by Angelique at one of the press conferences, he said, actions speak louder than words. I want to be here, or whatever. The action would be to sign the damn thing and get this, recruiting class signed, as opposed to having to, say all the right things and have people believe you. If you have it done, it's done. So it's weird. I mean, I'm sure we'll know more when it's over, and, whatever way it goes, exactly what the hell was going on. But Austin, you talked to a few recruits over the last couple days. What's the vibe from them? Because, they're guys that are locked in. These are commits that are going to sign on Wednesday. They're locked in with Michigan. But even they kind of admitted that some of the uncertainty is a little unsettling. So I guess what would you gather from them?
Yeah, I talked to 3 of the biggest recruits in the class, 3 4-stars, and Tristan Bounds, Lewis Hanson, and Keyshawn Bennett, and then Tyler McLaurin, also a 3-star linebacker. And it was a little disappointing to say, but their messages that they're receiving from Harbaugh and the staff were mixed. Tyler McLaurin was the only one of the bunch who said that Harbaugh told him that he's absolutely going to be back and that he's all in for Michigan. So McLaurin was super encouraged by that. And then Keyshawn Bennett, the 4-star DN from Connecticut, basically gave the opposite message. He said that Harbaugh has not told the guys in the class really anything about the situation or the NFL rumors. And Bennett admitted that he was very concerned by that. Lewis Hanson and Tristan Bounds both said that Harbaugh hasn't talked about it much with them either, but that they're going to stick with Michigan regardless, and that no matter what Harbaugh does, they're going to sign on Wednesday and be here next year, because they said they committed to the school and not necessarily to Harbaugh. But all 4 guys I spoke with made it clear that they want Harbaugh to remain as Michigan's coach, which doesn't come as a surprise when considering they obviously committed to him. But the concerning part about that whole thing was the mixed messages that these recruits are receiving on the recruiting trail, because the message hasn't been consistent. And that's obviously very concerning when considering these recruits are basically in limbo right now, seeing as how Jim Harbaugh isn't giving them a clear message right now.
And
Good Lord.
yeah, and Chris, you put in the inside the fort yesterday, basically that he's, and I think they'll get some more clarity this weekend, because apparently he's doing the virtual in-home visits, whatever that means. They take him on a tour around the living room or whatever. And he's set to tell these kids that he's going to be around regardless of an extension. You kind of touched on it, but how realistic? We know it's stupid, but how realistic is it that he comes back and doesn't have an extension done? I mean, you can't recruit anybody, and what kid would even listen to you, regardless of what you've done or what you. I mean, they liked him. Now there's a lot of 2022 kids that like him right now and like Michigan, but they're just going to tune out.
It sure sounds like a negotiation, right? And when I think virtual in-homes, I here's the table and here's what we would have eaten if you had been here.
Yeah.
Thing. And but just stupid, but it is what it is, man. 2020. You can't do it. You got to have something on the table. I don't care if it's a low buyout. It sure sounds like a negotiation to me. And that, Jim Harbaugh he says he's betting on himself. Well, if you're betting on yourself here and you've got an incentive-laden contract, which it sure sounds like is on the table, then, let's, sign it and bet on yourself, because I don't think that the NFL is calling. I don't think that's all that serious an option for him right now. We've heard, again, different NFL experts, guys that were wrong about the last coaching search. One, I think it was Mike Florio and NBC saying NFL teams are lining up, are showing interest. And then Jay Glazer saying, no, there's no interest. And I tend to believe that one a little bit more, given what's transpired with Jim Harbaugh at this point in his career. Doesn't look like the same guy. We've said that a billion times now. It doesn't have the same fire on the sidelines, so on and so forth. So, where's he going to go? What's he going to do? Does he have enough money where he could sit out a year and, retire? I would imagine. So, but does he want to? It doesn't seem like that's in the blood for him. I think he still wants to coach, but again, is he the same guy? Who knows? But I would imagine, guys, if you had a gun to my head, I've heard both ways, 60-40 against, 60-40 he comes back. I'm going to continue to say the longer it goes, the less likely it is that he returns. But you got to be fair to these kids too, and not just the kids that are looking possibly to transfer from this team. And guys, there are several that are talking about it. Trust me. Zach Carpenter, we alluded to it before it happened. The big lineman out of Cincinnati. He's one of many guys that want to know what the hell is going on here, along with the recruits and their parents and the parents of the kids. So get this crap done, fellas. Figure it out.
Yeah. So, basically, I will say this, like, looking at the NFL, there's some bad head coaches out there. Adam Gase with the Jets. I mean, Anthony Lynn with the Chargers is basically a lame duck. He's been terrible. Matt Patricia was the head coach of the Lions for 3 years. So I will say that, like, he probably doesn't have any offers on the table, and no one's reported that he has. But I think if he started pushing for that, somebody would probably take a chance on. I mean, you're taking chances on coordinators left and right. That's just, I guess, my feeling on it. But from a timeline perspective, do we expect? I saw somebody said, basically that. Ward Manuel said the end of the season means after the Champions Week game. But then if they play a bowl game, and we can get into that too, which it sounds like they want to. And I think they would get one, to be honest, if they actually want to play in one, because all bets are off at this point this season. There's no minimum games you got to win. So timeline wise, is this going to be January? Is this going to be, I guess nobody knows for sure. But I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, the Charmin Bowl, right? I don't know how many bowl games will be left. I think you're going to see a lot of them be canceled and go down. And teams are opting out, like you said. You got to ask the kids too. I think you need to take a vote here, and you can't just. These guys have been in seclusion for how long now, and in their own little world. And I think it's fair to them to say, "What do you want?" and take a vote. Because if you got a bunch of kids that don't want to be there, yes, it's important to practice, but I would imagine that if kids are thinking about leaving the program, and it's possible, that hey, are they going to stick around for bowl practice anyway? And then are you going to have to cancel it. Who knows, man? You need things settled before you can ask these kids to play in a bowl game. It's not fair to them. So, but I would think, again, if we don't hear something next week, we keep hearing that Ward Manuel's not going to fire him. Is it a game of chicken? We don't know. Is it okay? Who's leaving first, or who wants to pull the plug first? That theory's been out there as well. But ideally, they'd be sitting 4-2 right now, and you could give it this team in this year a pass due to COVID. That's obviously not the case. They're likely to lose their game. We're still here in Iowa, guys, that it's going to be Michigan, Iowa for a plethora of reasons in Iowa City next Friday. We'll see if that comes to fruition, but it's going to be an ugly finish. They're not going to be competitive in that game, in my opinion. And then it just gets worse. Then the question marks, the noise gets louder and everything else. So, I still lean towards, he's going to sign this deal, and that gives them an out if they have a bad year next year, probably with a lower buyout and everything else, or at the end of the next year. But I don't think there's anything guaranteed right now.
No, and I think it's worth pointing out, too, how Ward Manuel kept saying on that presser last week how him and Harbaugh speak at the end of every season, on every year anyway, and that they're going to do that again. This time around, Clayton, you asked whether or not that's at the end of the bowl game, a potential bowl game if Michigan were to play in one, and it better not be, because we're looking at late December, early January if that's the case, and that's obviously when a lot of head coaching changes are made around the country, and then teams are hiring new hot coaches on the market. So if Michigan were to go to a bowl game, I think it would be a disaster. I don't think kids would be bought in whatsoever. I think it would basically sum up the season, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Michigan get blown out regardless of who they play. Boston College is a good example in this case. Jeff Hafley, their head coach, the former Ohio State co-defensive coordinator, said that his guys voted not to play a bowl game this year, even though they're good enough to accept an invite to one, and they're all going to go home for Christmas and call it a season. I feel like Jim Harbaugh would not take that approach, regardless of what his players want to do. I think he wants to play in one no matter what, but it'll be interesting to see how this thing plays out, because, again, I don't think playing in a bowl game would be a good idea for this team, and if they do play next Friday at Iowa, I think maybe potentially get that game in, and then put a bow on this season and just turn the page and focus on Jim Harbaugh and Ward Manuel and the contract situation and get that wrapped up.
I think you have to vote. Bless you there. I think you have to vote on it and see if the kids want to, because if it was a normal season where you have 15 practices, or you get a week or two off, you practice 15 times, including, a few times down at the bowl site, but it's going to be a week, after the Champions Week game, essentially, especially with the how bad of a bowl game they'd be in. If the guys don't want to do it, there's no point. But I guess we'll see. Any last words on the whole situation? It's just crazy that we're talking about everything except on-field play. But like we mentioned a few times, 2020 is here we are.
It's crazy. It's December 12th, and they were supposed to be playing the Michigan-Ohio State game today. And I think it's pouring rain. I don't know if it's pouring rain in Columbus, but man, that would have been interesting, right? And it's just a weird year. We said there were going to be asterisks all over the place, and there are going to continue to be. Champions Week isn't going to be 1 versus 1. How do you pick? You've got a bunch of 2-win teams, right, in the East because of COVID and stuff like that, and only a couple that aren't. So just goofy. But to me, that really is insignificant compared to the bigger picture of what's going to happen with Michigan football in the near future. And we've seen, good teams with a lot of talent turned around quickly. Jim Harbaugh, what he did in his first year with Brady Hoke's guys, flat out and frankly, Brady Hoke left a lot more talent, in my opinion, than Jim Harbaugh has right now. So, which is disconcerting because there's no reason for that. You can get, we can talk all about the advantages and the disadvantages compared to other schools, but there's no reason that you can't recruit like Brady Hoke did here, and for God's sake, find a quarterback, right? And hopefully J.J. McCarthy's that guy, for the fan base, because I don't know that the elite quarterback that's going to get you to the next level is on the roster right now, and one will probably leave at the end of the year anyway. But for God's sake, at least give yourself a chance by recruiting like you can and putting your heart and your soul into it like you did when you first got here, because right now it ain't working.
Yeah, we saw Jim Harbaugh's early recruiting classes at Michigan and finished top 5 in the country. His 2016 and 2017 classes both finished at number 4. That 2020 class finished at 10. This year's could be another top 10 class. It's at number 9 right now in the country. So kids still want to play for Harbaugh. All the recruits that I've spoken with in this class have been very outspoken about how much they like him and how much they want to play for him. But does it really matter if he's bringing in another top 10 class if he can't coach these guys up properly? I know a lot of people are excited about this 2021 class, and those who are in support of Harbaugh want him to stick around for that reason. But I'll be honest, I don't know if it would matter, because I don't know if these guys would get coached up properly to allow Michigan to win at a high level if he sticks around for another year or 2 or 3 down the road.
Yeah, and Chris, you mentioned a couple times in the past of, it seems like they're recruiting off of a list. You can't. It's a top 10 class, but you don't have a D tackle. And you didn't have one last year. It's like there's some holes on this roster, and I agree that there was more talent when Brady Hoke left than there is now.
Yeah,
yeah.
The Wormleys and the Maurice Hursts and guys like that. Come on. Even Chase Winovich. Go find the football players, Jim. He had at Stanford. Look at that film and don't rely on some guy to bring you a list of 4-star players and then, pick guys out there. Don't get the low-hanging fruit. No disrespect to anybody, any of the kids coming in. There are a lot of good players coming in, but go find the football players that you think can play football. I don't give a damn what the measurables are and stuff like that. No, don't go get a 5'0", 40 corner or anything like that, but find guys who can play football and who want to play football and who want to go out and, kill and wreak havoc for the uniform. And to me, you do that, you're going to have a good chance at least to get back where you were, and then you can start thinking about the bigger fish like Ohio State, even though that's going to be a tough one to catch, man, unless the NCAA or something gets involved.
Yeah, it'd be them catching them, not Michigan at this point. And you can recruit off a list if you're Ohio State. You can get all the kids at the top of the list.
Right.
Even though they do evaluate, probably even better than most.
Yeah. Let's not pretend that they don't have. Yeah, let's not pretend they don't have a good thing going on there in a lot of ways. So, but do they belong in the SEC? Probably. I think that'd be a great place for them. And well, that's all we'll say about that.
Yep, we can leave it all there. We'll see everybody next week. Check us out at thewolverine.com. We're there 24/7 on the message board, articles, basketball. Hey, big game tomorrow, so we'll keep you updated on all of that. Use the promo code BLUE60 for 60 days of our premium content for free, interaction on the message board, everything else. And we'll see you next week.